Hey folks, Ian back once again. Let's talk about the next part of building your own custom campaign world. So the first one we talked about essentially diagramming out and like building out the surrounding area, the starting village, and then building out from there to build the whole kingdom, and essentially trying to determine population size, locations, and so on. From there, we just talked about cultures in the second one, where we talked about how there is cultures, subcultures, and countercultures that all interact and help define this world that you've created. Now we go into the next part, the myths, the legends. So, the myths and legends of the homebrew world are also very important. They're not only little small fishing hooks that you throw out to the players to try and get them to go upon some sort of side quest or even main quest, but they also are very important in essentially detailing out the world, making it feel more lived in and essentially more interesting and believable to your players. That's a very big thing when it comes to creating your own custom homebrew world, your own campaign world, but also it's a lot like writing in the sense of writing for a book or for a novel. You're creating a believable world in that the idea that there are things constantly happening or have happened, and the reader or the players are essentially trying to find more information about it, to look into it, to understand why the world is like this. So the myths and legends can range from anything from like the lost treasures of a famed thief to like the final burial site of some um, all important paladin that helped start the Grand Order or something like that. These things are very important not only for the idea of just filling in the world, but also they have a major impact on how well the campaign world is. Imagine we go back to that starting village, that first village. What myths and legends might the village know about? They might even have some that are very minor, but they are all about the founding of that village. Perhaps they know something about the paladin's final resting place because they have a story that was handed down throughout the generations about how the caravan, not the caravan, the funeral procession proceeded through that town, like, so long ago before they took the body off to be where it finally rests. Or perhaps, there are members in the leadership of that small town who descend from paladins who were on that funeral procession. These things are very important because, again, it, colors things out, but also it spreads the seeds around, those hooks around, to better help get your players on track and onto the story that you wish to tell. And this, like I said, could be either a main thing or a side thing. It really depends on how you want to do it, but that's just an example of how a larger one can have impacts in smaller areas. But also, they could have their own little stories of, legends of, minor things like, there's a legend of the grand fish that, Bob's ancestor, fished it from the lake. It was so huge that the lake itself, descended a little bit. And in exchange for putting it back, he was granted a magic ring or something like that. But it's those myths, those legends that help, make the town a little bit more believable and also makes the entire campaign world a little bit more believable. But also, you have to think about the leaders. This is also part of the myths and legends. The leaders, and I'm not just talking like the political leaders of the town, but also the religious ones. They are going to have their own myths and legends that they have essentially been handed due to their positions, or they have to memorize because of one reason or another. They're going to essentially be able to tell the story of something in the past, or chronicleize what is currently happening for the players to where they can build their own legend, their own myth about them. That's very important because it's also going to be the different perspectives. A religious leader will have a different purview on how things are versus a political leader. They may also turn things based upon how they wish to tell the story. So those are things to keep in mind. But when it comes to the myths, the legends, the leaders, there is still one, technically two things that are very important for, detailing out your world. And that is the villains and the heroes. You see, the players aren't the only heroes. There could be other heroes out there that could join them, might join them, won't join them. that's up to you as the dungeon master, but those heroes still exist. Your players have always heard about this hero. They might not ever meet him, but the idea that he is out there and he is active in doing things might help inspire them, and they might eventually try and go find him, to where he may aid them for a little bit, but it's like, hey, guys, this is your story, not mine. Uh, but villains are also kind of the same. There are many different types of villains, from the smallest to the biggest. Your small villains might be like, the owner of the local lumber mill, who essentially nickels and dimes his coworkers to the point that he essentially keeps them in debt, to where they are constantly in debt to him and they have no choice but to continue working for him. Maybe the villain for the town is the Lord Mayor, who just is corrupt and very, not caring of the villages at all, and just kind of just goes on doing whatever. These are things that you have to consider as, minor villains and what their motivations might be. A good example, Castlevania, the Netflix anime series. I want to say it was season 2 or season 3, but it was when they met Saint Denis, and they essentially were talking to the judge. The judge is a good example of a minor villain, because yes, he is unredeemable. He kills people just to maintain this little bit of peace and power that he has, to where people like step out of line, especially children, he sends them off to their deaths. That's what he does. He is a minor villain, and he aids the player, or aids the characters a little bit, because he doesn't think that what he's doing is wrong, or because he knows that if they are off dealing with something else, they won't bother with him. And those minor villains are something that you have to consider when it comes to positions of power. Again, could be religious, could be political, could be just plain old greed. But that's what you need to think about when it comes to minor villains, how they impact the world, how they impact the immediate area and influence. There could be even folk heroes or local heroes that come through every now and then, and how they affect the town. They might cause, a nice boon in business every time they come through, because they are spending gold that they got from their adventures. They are, retelling tales, things like that. Everyone wants to buy them a drink, stuff like that. You have to think of these aspects, because again, they add more flavor to the world. They add a better understanding, but at the same time, more of those hooks out there to better get your players into playing for either a side quest or a main quest kind of thing. I know I talk about side quest and main quest, but again, that's more of like, you have an overarching story you want to tell, but there's going to be smaller hooks out there that might pull the players one way or another, just to help change things up and tell a better overall story narrative. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. So for now, laters everybody.